Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 351 for the 9th of February. Let's start off with the first news, which is actually in the Russian territory. The Russian air defense in Bryansk have intercepted 10 Ukrainian drones in the vicinity of Stupochky and Bryansk region. Basically, this is still Bryansk region. The entire thing is Bryansk region, so it's a very weird anyway, yeah, so 10 drones were intercepted. Not sure where's the target. Moving on to the southern front. In the southern front at the Kherson region, at Kherson city, there's a Ukrainian Sukhoi 25 getting shot down. Reported by the Russian Defense Ministry. Is shot down by anti-air facilities. And moving on from the southern front, we are at the Zaporizhia line. At the Zaporizhia line, we do not have any fighting being reported, except that we do have a geolocation by Deep State UA of Russian forces in this location on the eastern side of Luhansk. So it's unclear if Luhansk is actually under Ukrainian control. If this means that this is the front line or something, it's just a geolocation. So moving on into the Donetsk front. So this is the Donetsk region, and at the Donetsk front, first there is a Ukrainian MiG-29 shot down over Novoperivka. So this shot down by the Russian Air Force. It's unclear if this is the correct Novoperivka. It's a bit deep from the front line, but anyway, moving on to the Voleda line, the Voleda region. Fighting is reported at Masyutivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and also fighting reported in the north of Shevchenko, according to SITREP maps. So it seems like a Russian push, in this direction. In the general sense, they are pushing in this direction, trying to control the entire road around here. Moving on, there is no indication of any more fighting around this region, this area here west of Voleda city. There is some footage that claims to be around here, where Russian forces are trying to push upwards and then along the tree line, but seems to have give up the push after I think 1 or 2 vehicles hit the mine, and then maybe they got artillery shell. I'm not sure. Didn't really watch the footage properly because it's not very important. Yeah, so moving on, at the Voleda region, there is shelling reported near Voleda, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Otherwise, there is no more fighting. Yesterday's report of the fighting near Voleda is not repeated. Moving on, there is also shelling reported at Vodyane. So shelling at Vodyane is not particularly surprising, because the Ukrainian forces use this location to reinforce the Voleda through this road, and any forces coming from Bilohorivka do make sense to go to Vodyane first, or from Konstantinivka and then going down, and they might actually park here first because this is the front line. So yeah, so no shelling in this region has been repeated for the past 3 days already. So it's pretty common nowadays. Moving on, at Novoperivka region, there is a geolocation of Russian forces in this region at this tree line here, and then SITREP maps reported the Russian forces are moving towards Novoperivka, which means that it's fighting on the eastern part of Novoperivka. Wrong color. Yeah, in this direction, which also give us some kind of a front line, which means the Russians indeed have not entered into the city just yet, or rather town. Moving on, at the Marinka region, fighting is reported still at Marinka. There is no information in terms of where the fighting is now, just a general report by War Gonzo that there is fighting within the city limits of Marinka. Then SITREP maps reported a bit more detailed. They say that there is fighting in the northern part of Marinka, where the front line looks a bit like this on their map now. So the Russian forces is pushing in the northern direction here. So that's all from Marinka. There's fighting reported at Krasna Horivka. I do suspect that this might not be the actual Krasna Horivka. It might be this one over here. this is also Krasna Horivka, but the Ukrainian Defense Ministry did not really specify which one, so I assuming it's this one because it's nearer to Marinka. So yeah, just take it with a pinch of salt. Moving on to the Avdiivka region. So at the Avdiivka region, there is fighting reported at Pervomaiske. There is also fighting in the area of Vodyane, and so the reports comes from Wogonzo. Both of them is coming from Wogonzo. And at the Avdiivka region, there is fighting reported at Avdiivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Wogonzo added that it's coming from Yasnovata. Where is Yasnovata? Yasnovata. Yeah, Yasinovata is here. So Yasinovata in this direction towards Avdiivka. So of course it's not so deep. It's just like this. So and then north of Avdiivka, there is a geolocation of Ukrainian forces in this position at this near this tree line here. This apparently this there's this is a village, and this village actually is called Vasile. So and then happens that Wogonzo also reported that there is a ground attack on Vasile, which is actually Vasile. So the Russian forces is now currently pushing in this direction, and then they actually bombarded the Ukrainian forces in this location that was being geolocated. So this looks like an attempt to push towards the northern industrial zone, and also pushing down to put pressure of some kind of semi-encirclement on Avdiivka. Further up north, there is fighting reported towards Novokalinove, according to Wogonzo, and this is coming from a direction of Novoselivka Druha. And according to, I believe it's Surya maps, I cannot remember, the attempt is actually to capture, to control this road. So which means that the Russian forces have not reached this road just yet. So so the fighting is actually still on the eastern side of the road. That's all from this region here. There's nothing on the New York front. Moving on to the Bakhmut front. At the Bakhmut front, there is fighting reported towards Stupochky. Ryba, the pro-Russian source, reported fighting continues in the city, in this translated text, which feels a bit weird. I'm not sure if they are actually in the village itself. My understanding is the Russian forces is still pushing towards Stupochky, and might not necessarily be inside Stupochky. So I think do take this information with a little bit of Soleda. There is also fighting reported towards Chasiv Yar, according to Wogonzo, and fighting is reported at Ivanivske. So according to Ryba, we've added more information than the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They said that the Wagner private military contractors have advanced south of Krasna Hora, which is actually Ivanivske, and approached the suburban areas, which means that the Russian forces is getting very close, and they are actually very near the suburban lines. So maybe that's what it means. We are not so sure. Geolocation, I think I reported this in the previous SITREP. Then the Ukrainian forces sent reinforcement to Ivanivske to help to reinforce the line here. So that's interesting. Over the Bakhmut city, at the Bakhmut city, fighting is reported in the cemetery region, where the Russians seems to make some progress in the cemetery region, and there is fighting reported in the Zabakhmutka region, which is actually this entire region here. This is actually a Zabakhmutka, and the Russian forces is actually trying to make advance in the eastern part of the Bakhmut city. Ukrainian Defense Ministry only reported there is fighting at Bakhmut, and that's all they say. Fighting also is being reported by Ryba in the area of the meat processing plant, which is actually here. So the Russian forces is still making the push in this direction. So still fighting from 3 different directions, from here, here, and here. The rest is not sure about all this. There's no reports about them. Moving on to the north, fighting continues to be reported at Paraskoviivka as well as at Krasna Hora. There is certain breakthrough of limited scope reported by Ryba and SITREP maps, with the Russian forces continue to push in the northern part of Paraskoviivka, and Ukrainian forces have sent reinforcement of the 30th separate military brigade to the area of Paraskoviivka. So while the Russians are pushing like this, Russians pushing like this, the Ukrainian forces is sending more reinforcement into Paraskoviivka to help to hold this defense line around here. So let's see how this goes. The Ryba have corroborated about the Russians taking this road here, corroborating this advance. Although it's a bit it's not necessary to need corroboration, because we do have footages to geolocate this, reporting from deep state UA, especially if it's the pro-Ukrainian side reporting on the Russian advance, then it's definitely have to be true. However, we do not see any information from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry talking about fighting in this area here at Vasyutivka, or in this area here, which is the Vasyutivka region. It was not mentioned in this morning's report. So moving on, there is fighting reported towards Dvorichne, according to SITREP maps and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, with the Russian forces pushing northward. There is no news about Masyutivka though, so and there's no news about Avdiivka. Over in the Sivas front now, there is fighting reported by SITREP maps in the northwest of Bilohorivka. The Russian forces is moving up this forest line here. Somehow the SITREP maps reported it as from Bilohorivka towards Vasily, so that's a bit strange. And in the north, we have War Gonzo reporting that there is fighting reported towards Vimka. I think this is a repeat of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's report. So I'm not sure if this one is related to this one. Might be the same thing, because if you follow this tree line, it is indeed going towards Vimka. So as mentioned before, this spike, take it with a pinch of salt. So this is just this is just a unicorn. Like, this is just a unicorn. Don't take it so seriously. Moving on, there is fighting at Spurny. So fighting is reported in the eastern part of Spurny, and it was reported by Ryba that the Ukrainians are using this gas station as a fortified area. So the Ukrainians are making a stronghold in this area, and the Russians are trying to storm it. Let's see how this goes. Spurny has been one of those pain in the ass locations for the Russian forces. They just doesn't seem to be able to capture this seemingly unimportant town of Spurny. As you can see, there isn't really much things here. Maybe this. I'm not sure what is this. Maybe this is very important. So anyway, it looks like a very this is actually military base, because you see all these fortified positions. This is actually used for vehicles to hide, and this looks like a military base. Maybe this is the reason why it took so long to capture. So maybe that's the reason. Moving on, there is fighting. There is a Ukrainian attack towards Zolotarivka, according to SITREP maps, with the Ukrainian forces moving towards Zolotarivka. The fighting, however, is actually mentioned to be around here. So because SITREP maps mapping is slightly different from mine. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. There's a non-issue there. That's all from the Sivas front. There is shelling report at Ryahorodok. So it seems a bit far. I'm not sure it's actually referring to Ryahorodka, because there's another Ryahorodka on top somewhere. Yeah, I just remember there's someone there. I don't want to find. It's a waste of time. And over the Kreminna front, at the Kreminna front, the Russian forces is indeed still continuing their Kreminna offensive, fighting in the Serebryanske forestry and around Dibrova. And there's a geolocation of Russian forces in this location, which is actually the destruction of the BMPT, the Terminator. at this location here. So this also suggests that the Russian forces have indeed pushed a lot more than we previously known, and this might actually suggest why there is fighting around Shepilivka. Because yesterday we did previously we did mention that there is fighting near Shepilivka, which means that actually it is the Russians actually pushing in this direction, because it's so near. So they actually just dropped the name Shepilivka to describe where the fighting is. Fighting is currently still within Serebryanske, and there is the shelling report also by the Russian Defense Ministry in the forestry as well. Shelling is reported near Dibrova, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, with the Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioned that the Russians are still on the offensive in the area of Dibrova. So moving on, there's shelling reported at Yampolivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, and heavy fighting is still ongoing in the eastern part of Nevske, mainly around the area of the Balkazuravka, which is actually this valley region here. So this valley region here, the fighting is still ongoing in the area here. Moving on, that's all from the Kreminna front though. That's all from the Kreminna front. Moving on to the Svatove front. At the Svatove front, there is fighting reported at Hryanykivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Russian Defense Ministry also only mentioned about shelling. They used the Air Force and artillery as well as heavy flamethrowers to attack the Ukrainian forces at Hryanykivka. And at Novoselivske, the same thing happened in the same report of the shelling, as well as at Berestove, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Moving to the Kupyansk Front, the shelling is reported at Avdiivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry as well. And we are now into the Dvorichne region, which is actually here, the Dvorichne region. Latest update is that the Ukrainian source, the pro-Ukrainian source Deep State UA, have considered the Russians have captured Dvorichne as well as Horobivka. So these two towns in their mapping has been basically mapped as Russian controlled. So the Russians have captured Dvorichne and Horobivka, and they are currently continue to push towards Hryanykivka. And there is a geolocation of Russian forces by Deep State UA at this location here, which suggesting that at least the front line in the attack is around this region here. So fighting is currently still being reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry of fighting at Hryanykivka. And any mention of Dvorichne is no longer mentioned, which do kind of corroborates that Dvorichne is actually captured by the Russian forces. The Russian Defense Ministry did not acknowledge the capture of Dvorichne. They simply mentioned the shelling at Hryanykivka. So yeah, so that's all from the Dvorichne region. Oh yeah, there's one more thing. There's also fighting reported at Masyutivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, that, as they mentioned, Masyutivka, which means that in the overall picture around Dvorichne region, the Russians are pushing Hryanykivka. They have captured Horobivka, Dvorichne, and they are actually pushing for this Masyutivka, and they are attacking Synkivka. So it looks like this now. So that's all from the Kupyansk Front. There's nothing to report on the Kharkiv Front, and that's all for the summary for the day of 351 for the 9th of February, and I'll see you in the next update.